Hi, I'm Ryan.
Hey, I'm Jess, and you're listening to Your Therapist is Not Okay.
Today we're going to talk about the subject of money and therapy. We hear from lots of folks in our profession about how difficult it is to afford therapy and kind of wondering about what sets the rates for therapy and things like that. We want to talk about everything that might come up when it comes to money and your therapist.
Ryan, I think that this topic is one that we've actually had on our minds since season one. Even when we started to plan what we wanted to do for this podcast, this was a topic that feels relevant because it comes up a lot. One of the most common phrases that I can hear often, either from supervisees telling me that a client has said it, even some of my clients have said, is why would I know that you care about me? Or how could you care about me when I have to pay you to see you? And it feels like this is a pretty common sentiment once you kind of get deeper into the therapeutic relationship.
Mm, hmm Yeah, absolutely. I think that kind of question and that kind of discussion is definitely what brought this to our minds.
Mm.
And in fact, I think in a focus group that we ran at a conference, it was one of the questions we got there was something like, how do I know that you care about me when I'm just paying you?
Mm.
So it's really, we've come up against it in so many different places. And I think one of the things I want to start by acknowledging on this topic is that therapy is expensive.
Yeah.
It is a really considerable expense anytime that I've gone to therapy. It's been on my mind. It's been part of how I decide who I'm going to see.
Yep.
So I get I'm right where there with you.
Mm.
However, therapy is also worth it in my mind. And the times I've gone, I've ended up feeling like it's really worth it, even if it feels like a challenge to pay for. And it takes a lot of expertise. So we can kind of dig today into why does it cost so much? What are the kind of like expectations in the relationship that might feel burdened by the financial exchange? Yeah. So let's talk together about why it costs so much and what the cost means.
And just to flag, we're really talking about us in private practice. There are a number of affordable therapies, and even us at Centered Self, actually, we have an affordable kind of therapy model when it comes to seeing a trainee therapist that we
Mhm.
supervise in order to kind of offset the cost. A lot of these lower cost clinics, however, often have huge waiting lists and can take only a certain amount of sessions before you're done. So they're often, if you really want an investment in your health, often going to someone who's private practice means that you can have that staying power with somebody consistently over time. And that's really what we're talking about today is really Ryan and my profession as private practitioners.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I've worked in the nonprofit sector with some of those other places and working in private practice, it is a little bit different and there's pros and cons to each of those and there's different levels of accessibility to each of those. But yeah, I think it's really important to acknowledge that, yeah, we're really talking about private practice here.
Mhm.
But then there can be kind of a question about whether or not the higher cost therapists are the quote better therapists. And we've talked a lot about, not all therapists are created equal, we've said.
Yeah.
But is the money part of it?
Well, that made me think about something that I was going to ask you as you were talking about your own experience. You are saying that you always look for the cost, or you always paying attention to the cost when picking a therapist. Are you trying to find somebody that's worth more so that you know that the value's more?
Hmm. That's really interesting. I mean, I think I'm usually looking within a range, based on what I can afford realistically, or sometimes based on what in the US what providers my insurance will cover. Um, so I think that kind of, but I don't necessarily think when I see a provider that charges much more than the average provider, that that means that they're better. I don't
Yeah.
necessarily assume that. I don't necessarily assume that they're worse either, right? I'm looking for kind of depth and integrity and, an ability to meet me, which isn't determined by how much someone is paid. It isn't determined by how long someone's been to school. There's some things that are just in that relationship that you can
Mhm.
hopefully glean in the free initial consultation that the vast majority of providers will offer.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, there's a huge disparity, I would say, between psychologists, psychotherapists,
Mhm.
counselors. So you're also, depending on who you're grabbing a hold of for your for your provider, for your practitioner, you're also going to be paying a different fee. I would say psychotherapists are pretty much in the middle ground of that. I know some psychologists that will charge anywhere from 250 to 350 an hour. Um, it would probably be hard pressed to find a psychotherapist that would even be at the bottom range of that. There are some, but it's not common. And I think there's also a bit of a misnomer here because most of the time when I'm working with supervisees and when I think about myself,
Mhm.
I actually have a fear of charging more for my clients, knowing that it can be pretty hard to pay for me. I actually waited until HST was taken off in Canada on psychotherapy before raising my rates. And even then, I only raised it enough so that clients had they were saving $15 and I raised it 10. So the total amount that they were like that was off of this because of HST was $25. So I took 10, but then they could still have $15 off. And I did that so that they're like, "Ooh, I'm still paying less than I was." Even though I got to have a higher rate. And I did that
Mm.
so that no one felt like they were out of pocket suffering. So even throwing myself under the bus, like I can get quite nervous about raising my rates, um, which means that a lot of psychotherapists don't rise with the cost of living and things like that. And we can get scared of wanting our worth to be recognized in a monetary value when we use the quote unquote kind of excuse of just we're just listening to somebody. Um,
Mm.
So I'm curious about what your opinion is on that. It kind of adds a little bit of a wrench into the mix of why are we so expensive?
Mm. That's really interesting. And I think, like talk therapy can at times feel to folks that like it's just listening. I never really feel like it's just listening myself, or if it is, quote, just listening, like it's a very intensive version of listening that you probably aren't going to have elsewhere in your life. And if we were doing it all the time, wouldn't be sustainable throughout our lives, right? Just because you have the capacity for that kind of listening doesn't mean that you're able to do it for
Yeah.
12 hours a day or even 5 hours a day.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that if you kind of think about how challenging, even if it's wonderful, it can be to listen to a friend talk about, say, their grief or something painful and traumatic that they went through for an hour or two over coffee. um, that's really intense to
Yeah.
do all the time, right? Or to
Mm.
do back to back for, 3 to 6 hours, as many folks do. So I think that even it tends to the listening we're doing tends to go even deeper beyond that because we're keeping in our head a whole catalog of your experiences, of your patterns, and the things that you've expressed, and we're going to help you make connections and learn and understand more and kind of have a trajectory of growth. Not
Mm.
just nod and say that sucks and I'm sorry for you,
Yeah.
which is fine. That's wonderful behavior for a friend is to, listen and be there for you and care about you. The listening we're doing, I think, is a lot more. Um, and includes like this different level of relationship.
Mm. It also is really hard to learn. I think a lot of people don't realize that for almost anybody that has gone through schooling, there's a lot of unlearning that therapists have to go through in order to be the kind of listener that can meet you right where you're at.
Hmm.
A, a lot of it's taking ourselves out of the equation, learning how to put ourselves into somebody else's POV and being able to then respond from that area in a way that hits on impact of what they're talking about. And that can be really hard to achieve.
Yep, absolutely. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of energy, effort, kind of personal, emotional engagement as
Mhm.
well. And that varies from school program to school program, and that's part of why you're going to want to be discerning when you're choosing a therapist, of course.
Hmm.
Um, but I guess to kind of like start to challenge the way we value our mental health professionals, we kind of have this fact that our producer Denise pointed out that counselors are some of the lowest paid professionals that have a master's degree or more, right? All counselors or therapists have to have at least a master's degree, especially if we're talking about US, Canada. It's different in different places, but
Yeah.
three of the lowest paid master's degree professions are rehab counselor, mental health counselor, and marriage and family counselor. That data is from like 2023 as well, so it's pretty recent.
Mm.
Um, and there were other forms of mental health providers that were in those lowest 10 paid with master's degrees. So like also want to challenge, even though we're acknowledging therapy is expensive, it's not nearly as expensive as most similar level of training professionals. We
Mm.
talked a little bit before about like what we can or what our clients can be expecting to pay.
Yep, we did.
Yeah, but we can talk about this a little bit more because it varies a lot depending on where you are and what type of professional you're working with. I guess we'll probably speak most directly towards people in the Greater Toronto area because that's what we know best through Centered South. Um, so if that's not where you're at, I'd encourage you just to kind of look up average therapy cost in your locality. For example, New York City, it's going to be a lot more.
Yes, fair enough. And in USD.
Yes.
Uh, yeah, I think our low cost therapist at Centered Self can is usually based within $100 a session.
Hmm.
She can go down or they can go down lower, depending on your need, but generally speaking, you're looking at paying about 100 a session. That is half of what you would pay to see me. And I have over 11 years experience being a psychotherapist, but also over 10 years of schooling, doing a doctorate and whatnot. And
Hmm.
so for half the price, you get someone who's being trained by me, but somebody who also then can still meet you where you're at, but maybe not at the level of expertise that somebody who you'd be paying the higher end for would have.
Right.
And most people, I would say it's not uncommon to see a psychotherapist anywhere from 130, generally speaking, to about 170, roughly in there, especially if you, depending on experience, level
Hmm.
of schooling, but also thinking if you just do masters as a baseline, that's usually kind of what you're looking at. And a lot of therapists will increase their rates every year, or if they've had a major milestone. For example, going from an RPQ, which is a registered psychotherapist qualifying, to a registered psychotherapist, no longer with the qualifying, you might raise your rates at that point. Once you're done supervision and you need a number of hours of supervision, and then you become independent so you can start being a supervisor to other people, you might raise your rates at those that time too, because you now have a fully independent license. So there are certain times where people might think to raise their rates, and it usually comes with the level of expertise. I have always contended that seeing somebody who's training, and we talked about this actually quite recently, um, doesn't necessarily mean you're getting somebody who's not as good as somebody who has a level of expertise. If you can only afford to pay around 100 a session, you will, and you want a trainee, you're going to have a number of supervisors helping this person along. A lot of people will have, a lot of the students will have videos that they're going to have to do. So you're having a lot of extra care there.
Hmm.
And the other thing you might want to consider is there a specific specialty you're looking into? If you have borderline personality and you are seeing a specialist, you might be paying more for that specialty that they've also really integrated into their practice, probably by doing extra coursework and or programs.
Hmm. And sometimes different modalities might charge differently or might interact differently with the systems around them. Um, I know in the US, there's like some modalities that wouldn't be as covered by insurance or are less likely to want to themselves work with insurance. Psychoanalysis is often one of those. Folks might have like a different rate for doing EMDR sessions. Lots of different things to like consider when you're looking for a therapist about what might be impacting the price. And for like, as Jess was saying, the investment that your provider has put into learning additional information, skills, gaining additional experience to work with stuff. Um, and sometimes, like we've talked about a little bit here so far, like having a doctorate can
Mhm.
be an indication of experience and specialty knowledge. It also means that they've gone to school longer than many similar professionals, right? It takes longer in most countries to get a doctorate or PhD in psychotherapy than it takes to become a medical doctor or a lawyer or a highly experienced trade person like electrician or a contractor, these kinds of things. And yet those folks' fees are often much higher, especially when we're talking about medical doctors and lawyers.
Mm. I
Um,
No, go ahead.
and that's kind of has left us wondering about a why. Why would we be more likely to challenge the cost of therapy than we would to challenge the cost of a lawyer?
I've often thought about this in terms of how our mindset is. I
Mm,
think that as society, we are very geared to see the amount that we have to spend on a lawyer, let's use that as our example, as something that makes sense.
mm.
If and depending on what law firm I go to, I might be paying more because I get the best, you know? There's this return on investment. And I'm starting to see it now, but it's hard sometimes to see it so clearly when it comes to mental health.
Absolutely. I think there's something in that the assumed return on investment
Yeah.
that people put out there that like hiring a lawyer is going to save me a lot of money or help me avoid a certain expense, things like that that feel like a direct financial
Mm,
return of money.
yeah.
Or like hiring an accountant means that you're gonna like find all the right ways to manage your money and probably save money and maybe be able to make more money, optimize things around that.
Mm,
But what about when the investment is your mental health and well-being?
yeah.
It's not going to give you a direct return of money.
No. And a lot of times it's not as cut and dry. You might not see the investment right away. It might not be until you look back and you're like, wait, I'm not suffering with this, or I'm not struggling with this particular
Mhm.
problem anymore. I haven't even thought about it in months.
Hmm. Yeah, and as you're saying that, like that delay, I'm thinking that like sometimes it gets worse first. Is
Hmm.
for me, it's not uncommon to see a client go into therapy and then stuff starts to come up, even more stuff than they anticipated. So for maybe an initial period or various periods during a long course of therapy, things might feel a little bit more challenging, even though you will hopefully also feel supported in that challenge. Growth
Hmm.
is not easy.
It can be very weird to spend a certain amount of money and come out of the session feeling way worse than you walked into it. It's like, why did I just spend $150 to feel like shit? And I totally understand that it's happened to me. And it's like, it's all part of the journey. You're like, I don't like this part of the journey. It's an expensive, shitty part of the journey.
Right? Is there no moving walkway? Like, come on.
Right?
Uh,
One of the things that we were talking about before recording this that I really liked was actually something that I don't think a lot of people know about. And
mm,
that's the hidden cost for your psychotherapist. And that I thought that was like a really neat way to break it down. Let's use 150 was like the amount.
mm,
Well, a private practitioner often does everything themselves. They're going to be doing all their paperwork, all the billing. They probably have certain things that they've set up or paying for monthly to help them with these things, but they're probably going to be doing their own accounting, keeping their own spreadsheets, or maybe even paying for uh, some sort of software that will help with accounting. They might have to pay for an admin assistant if they do have somebody or a note keeper. They might have to pay for different accountants, lawyers if they're becoming more incorporated. They will be paying for their advertising costs. And they're going to be talking about the time that they spend in between sessions with a client, which is generally doing research or preparing, thinking about going through and all the things that you might be asking for. Some of my clients will ask for a letter. I'm one of the rare psychotherapists that I don't usually charge for having to write something quickly for a client.
Mhm.
And so all of these things can come into that aspect of keeping us afloat, that I thought was really interesting. And some of the yearly ones are our insurance, our
Mhm.
license fees, thinking about the ways in which us just being able to be credible as psychotherapists actually costs over $1,000 a year, to keep ourselves like just being able to have this title.
Mm. Yeah, like all those little costs like really add up, and there's lots of things in there that folks can do themselves. And so, then they're not paying for it, but it's more time that they're spending, right? So the cost comes one way or another. So there's a lot to consider when it's not just the 50 minutes that you see your therapist, that they're doing stuff for you,
Yeah.
is kind of what I would argue. And, the initial cost of psychotherapy training, especially to the level of doctorate, is very high and it's very rarely covered by grants or just like the general stipends that some types of degrees might have, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
a lot of the hard sciences have a lot more funding that goes into them because the research structure around them is very different.
Yep.
Companies invest in that. There's not a lot of mega corporations investing in trainee therapists. That would be
No.
cool though. If anyone's interested in doing that, contact us.
We would love your investments. That's totally right. When you and I were going to the University of Edinburgh, we were choosing it because we thought the program was quite rigorous. It was incredibly expensive, and there,
Yes.
at least for when I was looking into it, there was absolutely no funding that would be assuaging the cost. It was student loans, and where there's a will, there's a way.
Yep. Exactly right. Exactly right. And then after that, we have requirements from our regulating bodies to do regular professional training, which is important, and I'm glad we have that. But
Mm.
it tends to come at a cost. And a lot of the best programs that are offered are not cheap, especially
Mhm.
if we want to pursue certification in a specialty or something like that. That's going to usually be thousands of dollars of training.
Just realizing that it allows you to kind of realize, as a client, it definitely allows me to realize that for us to become the kind of person that can meet you in the darkest of the dark, it
Mhm.
comes with a lot of training. As I said earlier, a lot of unlearning of the ways in which we're taught how to respond to somebody in order to meet you right into that moment. And so, in some ways, that investment is getting somebody that can meet you in it. Your investment might not be something that's so tangible right now, but it might actually be the aspect of being able to invest in something that impacts your future in a way that can be so much more profound than a lot of the other things we might be investing in. And in some ways, we're processing our past to heal our future.
Absolutely. And so, where that investment might not be that direct financial return, it may well even lead to a lot of financial return. It might mean that we're able to stay working or get
Yeah.
back to working or feel, confident and self-aware enough to go to kind of like the level that we would like to go within our careers. It might also have other less financial kind of rewards about just like feeling more at peace, being more loving towards yourself and others. Um, and those are the kind of investments that personally I think make life worth living.
Mhm. I like that you said that about the even the financial part though, because how many
Mm.
times have we in a with a client built up the confidence to ask for that raise
Hmm.
or to apply for the job even if we're not perfect for it, to start to look at some of the ways in which we might diminish ourselves. All of those things we wouldn't necessarily consider, we're helping a client financially, but in a lot of ways that is the outcome. And if we are feeling more confident with ourselves, we are going to also be able to allow ourselves to take time off when we need to so we don't burn out, or all of these different areas.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So with that, I know we both do things, including having students and trainees, for things we can offer when folks are struggling to pay, or because we want as many people to be able to access high quality therapy as possible. We're passionate about it. One thing that we have to navigate is our guilty feelings.
When someone can't pay
Mm-hmm.
or when someone's struggling.
Yep.
Ugh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, I know it comes up for me too, especially if it's client I've been working with for a while and they have maybe their situation changes.
Yeah, this touches on a spot for me because
Mm.
even in November, for example, I'm going to be doing a market selling my pottery mugs. Anyone that's in Toronto area, if you look on Centered Self website, I'll be letting you know where I'm going to be. And all the money for these mugs are going to go into our bank account in order to help when I feel like someone needs to have a little like a subsidization on their therapy, trying to build it up. Because I can feel heartbroken when someone loses a job. During COVID, this was a huge one where clients all of a sudden would get laid off and need therapy the most at this moment, but can't afford to see me because they no longer have the insurance coming through. Or insurance hasn't been able to pay them enough to see me consistently. It's hard to navigate guilt in that way. Or when we're talking about their lack of finances as a therapeutic topic and they're still paying my rate. It's one of those things where I think every therapist has to navigate. How do I not try to fix this for them?
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Because there, well, in those cases, there's so often part of me that wants to say, like, you know what? It's fine. Just don't pay me this time. Right. Because we have that relationship is not one-sided. Right.
No.
That's part of the initial topic for this is like, do you care about me if I have to
Yeah.
pay you? And we are absolutely coming back to this in a few minutes here, but like, yes, that's why we feel guilty about charging you so much. If we didn't care, there would be no need to feel guilty, right?
Yeah.
Um, so we do these things that we've talked about to try to mitigate costs, like um, offering student therapists. If people really can't pay and they need to stop, like making sure we help them find something that might be more affordable, give them some referrals to local agencies and things like that. Or helping to make a plan for seeing each other biweekly or something like that, if that can help alleviate some of the expense. Working with insurance, not always fun, not always easy, but working with insurance is something that we do that is overall worse for us. Especially in the States, the reimbursement tends to be lower than what we get paid.
Mm.
Yeah, those are all kind of things that come to my mind that we do to try to help mitigate the cost. And as Jess was saying before, like being really thoughtful about what we do with our rates so that they're sustainable for us, but not unreasonable generally for,
Mm.
what the market rates are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's some clients, I remember when I lowered my rate, when HST went away, there were some clients that actually rebelled against it. Like, I want to pay you your full rate. And I was like, this was never my full rate. You were
Right, that was
paying,
Texas.
yeah, you were paying the government. My full rate was 185. It was less. But it shows the dedication to that relationship to like what they're getting out of it.
Hmm.
Which I think now means that we get to pivot. So we started the podcast really allowing the question to stand as is. Why is therapy so expensive? And it's a bit kind of like cut and dry, right? It's not the most exciting, but it's an important thing to kind of start to look at the whys it's expensive and also the value that's coming in through it. But you're right, Ryan. The second part of that question was if I'm paying to see you, where's the reality of this relationship? Is this relationship real? Do you actually care about me? And let's pivot and chat about that.
Hmm.
Like, what have clients said that to you, and what do you make of it?
Clients have said that to me. Absolutely. And for me, I think one of the things that really stands out to me with that is just a client maybe feeling really isolated and lonely and feeling like you're the only person I can trust and talk to.
Yeah.
And it kind of feels like this additional wound that I have to pay to have the only person that I feel like cares about me right now.
Mm.
So I think it's usually speaking much more to that pain of isolation than
Yeah.
anything that actually has to do with the money. And it's screaming the question, do you care about me?
Would you be here if I wasn't paying you?
Right.
Yeah.
And that for me is when the guilt really comes in huge because no,
Mm.
I wouldn't stop caring, but we need to put food on our tables,
Mm.
right? So like
Yeah.
we will offer the things that we've talked about that we always offer to try to help keep things affordable because it does matter to us,
Mhm.
but there's a degree to which we can go before it's not feasible for us.
It's a tough thing to say, but it's the reality, right? And I think what you said there that I want to hold on to is it doesn't negate care, but it does mean that this is a profession that in order for us to keep doing, we need it to be sustainable.
Hmm.
And I think that's a really important part that ties into something that we've talked about in other podcast episodes, which is when you get to a point in a relationship with a client, it's not uncommon for that aspect of wanting more or wondering about more. I find
Mm.
it rare, not never, but I find it rare for this very particular question to come up in the very beginning of therapy. It's usually once we've built an established relationship. And that aspect of why can't we be friends outside of here? Or I wish I could
Mhm.
have more of you. I wish I could ask you more questions. Do you care about me because I have to pay you to see you? All of this comes in this really important time where the relationship's developing.
Mhm.
And it can be a really tricky thing to navigate for both of us, for client and therapist. One of the things that I usually tell my clients that I really firmly believe, I just know it would be true, that if I ever won the lottery or came into a bunch of money, I'd still see them on Monday. It's not that the money is the only thing keeping me here. I need it in order to keep doing this. But if something happened where all of a sudden the money was just there and I could not, like, I didn't have to charge, it wouldn't bother me. Like, I would still be there. I think that that can help.
Mm.
And I really mean it. Like, I don't think I'm ever going to retire because I really genuinely get excited for seeing my clients and for wondering about that. I think that we're getting paid for our expertise and for being there and for walking somebody through something in a very particular kind of relationship that doesn't negate the care or that we're only here because of the money.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, us getting paid at a reasonable rate also means that we can be present in a good way for you, that we can really show up as much as we would like to and as much as you need us to,
Mm.
without having to see twice as many or more clients in order to make the same amount of money. And in order to avoid creating more of kind of a revolving door situation where clients are coming and going all the time because we're more mentally absent, we're not providing the right level of care, and we're rushing people through for money.
Mhm. That fits in with burnout quite a bit. In order for us to be the high level that we want to be, we actually cannot see 10 clients a day. We can't work that kind of full day. Even for me, even seeing more than five in a day. Like five would be top for me. I
Mhm.
love four. That I know that my fourth client's going to get the same level of energy as my first, second, and third. I know that I can do it for five, but I love not having to so that more of my energy can pour into my clients. And so for me, I think it's the quality that I can have. Um,
Mhm.
And that also then mitigates burnout. So I don't have to take a leave myself. A lot of psychotherapists go on leave. It is a very high level burnout job. And so I think what you're talking about there with the revolving door, about the level we can do, it is a quality aspect over quantity that you're speaking of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think for me and I think for you as well, like I would much rather do a quality job than a quantity job. And I never want
Yeah.
my clients to be check boxes, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
I think it's time for us to kind of wrap this up and share our closing thoughts.
Sure.
Yeah. I just kind of want to reflect that the cost of therapy really is an outcome of the pressures of our healthcare system. Um, and with that, it also means it's similar, if not much less, than other professionals at a similar level. So we're really wanting to challenge today and in the future this discrepancy in what folks are willing to spend on different types of professionals, the cost we're willing to pay lawyers, accountants, medical doctors, contractors for renovating your home, these things. And think more about how can we value mental health interventions higher? How
Hmm.
can we realize that they matter as much as a nice kitchen, if not maybe
Mhm.
more? I might argue, although I love a kitchen, has to be said.
Mhm. Yeah, or your next tattoo, or any of these kinds of things. And also to realize that, like, when you're investing in therapy, you will not see that investment probably as like black and white stark in front of you than you will if like you're going to get your teeth whitened or whatever it is. That the investment probably comes, as I had said before, and looking behind and realizing I'm no longer burdened by this. And I maybe never will be again. Maybe I'm over this. Or I'm not snapping at people the way I used to. I don't have that shortened tether anymore because I worked on some of the things that made me at the end of my rope. All of these kinds of investments mean that you're a different person. And for me, I think that's priceless, but also can add value to what you're doing when you're seeking out a therapist.
Absolutely. I think the ultimate summary here for us is we do care and we do need to get paid.
Give
Both of
us
those are
that
true.
money.
Give us that money. And our notes for this episode, part of the title is Put Your Hands Up, I'm a Therapist.
Therapy host.
We had a lot of fun writing this script.
Hmm.
Thank you for listening and letting us kind of talk about all the various aspects of like what makes therapy expensive and
Hmm.
to also make sure that we are saying loud and clear that we care about our clients. We care about you regardless of money.
Yeah. I think that's the bottom line. That payment isn't to keep us in the chair. It's allowing us to do this work as our vocation. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, check out our others. And stay tuned for even more episodes coming up.
Follow us and leave a review on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please tell your friends.
You can also follow us on Instagram too, at Your Therapist Is Not Okay. Also, if you have any questions that you want us to answer, send us a DM there. We would love to answer your questions. And a lot of our topics come from listeners just like you.